Page 1 after the joint session.
The empty agenda.
(9 a.m.) and this is a joint session of the Town Council of Fort Myers Beach with our advisory committee chairs. It's Thursday, January 21st. It's 9 a.m. We'll stand for the pledge, and then we'll get on with our meeting. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Surprise, right? Wow, how could that happen?
This is sort of like a summit meeting here with all of our chairs here of the committees. I want to welcome you on behalf of the council this morning to this gathering. And as always, thank you for your service to the town. So with that being said, what we're going to do is just have a little freewheeling discussion here. Each chair will give their individual report, and then we'll open it up for questions from the council, any discussion, so forth. I think it's 15 minutes apiece. Am I correct in that? Okay, well, whatever it takes, and then we'll just go from there. 90 minutes we have. Okay, so that's 15 apiece, I think. All right, we'll start with the Public Safety Committee, and John Goggin is here this morning. Welcome, John, and you have the floor.
All right. Thanks, Ray. You have submitted to you our comments, the areas we're working on. There's actually two documents. One is the areas we're working on. The other is a detailed description of the process we're following for the discovery with the fire department, the Lee County Sheriff, et cetera. So the first thing we're doing is research and recommendations for the public safety process. Process to discover addressable issues. Solutions, recommendations could involve a broad spectrum ranging from community policing, establishing neighborhood watch programs, lighting, street lighting and crosswalk lighting, safe haven shelter, signage, etc. Process in general is step one, discovery of existing issues with the Lee County Sheriff and the Fort Myers Fire Department, monthly reports, public survey. So what we're doing is we've got the monthly reports for the last 3 months from both the county fire sheriff and the Fort Myers Beach Fire Department, and we're going through and eliminating anything that is not recurring and anything that they're already working, so it's criminal, they're working on it. We're looking for things that, like domestic violence, so we're looking for pedestrian vehicle accidents, so we can look at, was there a lighting issue, was there a signage issue, et cetera. And then the other thing we're doing is going to do a public survey. We have what the sheriff and the fire department report on, but we also want to get the perception of the citizens themselves. What do they see as issues? And the one that comes up constantly is homeless. Nonstop is homeless. The problem with homeless is that's all they say, and homeless is not a crime. So what we're trying to do is refine the survey in such a way that they can tell us what activity this homeless individual that they're talking about is actually committing. Is it trespassing? Is it stalking? Is it public intoxication? So that we can find out if it's something community policing or the Lee County Sheriff themselves can do some enforcement on. If not, and it's just a homeless because they don't like having homeless around, that's not an issue, and we'll bring that up to the council and how they want to address that. Step two is once we determine which ones we can possibly work on through community policing, lighting, et cetera, we will then come up with a recommendation and what it'll cost, an estimated cost to do that, estimated cost for community policing, how it affects the lighting study. Is this something where we want to put in neighborhood watch, so it's education? A lot of what's going on with the fire department is education. For example, short-term rentals. Under 2 units, there's no requirement for inspection. So we're looking at the opportunity to maybe during the registration process, have them, the individual that's doing the rental and applying, from our website, as they're trying to apply, actually send them to the Fort Myers Beach Sheriff's or Fire Department and give them self-inspection instructions so that they can go through the process, identify why it's an advantage to them to doing this, or possibly even, give them education where they have to go through and do a self-inspection if that's a big problem. And then what we'll do with all those is after the recommendations, we will then provide a monthly report or a quarterly report, depending on what the council wants, as we review every month in the committee. We review the progress of these recommendations, and then we'll give a report to you as to any trends, changes, anything that's modified in the island that needs to be reevaluated. The second issue we're working on, and this is one we may or may not be working on, is the foot of the bridge design. As those that were on the council last year remember, the committee put forward a recommendation or design that showed no crosswalks at all at the foot of the bridge. We had navigation signage and walls and that directed the pedestrians to go in various directions that took them out of the crosswalks. The design that was approved by the council has, I think it's 8+ crosswalks there. Anybody who's tried to get across the bridge and watch that volunteer sheriff guy stand there and direct traffic knows that that's our biggest bottleneck. Street light going up at the old St. Carlos and I guess in Crescent, we'd like, if you want to revisit the number of crosswalks. It's not revisiting the infrastructure there, it's revisiting the number of crosswalks. Last March, right after you approved that, I talked to Rob from the county. He agreed to come in and have a discussion with his engineers to explain why they were there and to see if there were any alternatives. COVID hit, everything got delayed in the meantime. So the question will be to you, do you want us to open up that discussion with the county again to look at crosswalks? These are markings. They're not going in and talking about the restructure of the roadway. It's the crosswalks on those roadways and ways to provide barriers that would direct people off of the end of the bridge. Next thing we have is, you've seen the shelter went up, the Safe Haven shelter. Part of it went up over on Bay Street. What we agreed to in May of, I think it was 2019, was to add communications there. And what Chelsea has put together is the quote from, it's a code blue, and what it would have is a communication there that allows someone to, if they feel in jeopardy, they can go up, press a button on this code blue device that's there, and get immediate contact with the fire or the sheriff. It gives people, as we go up and down the island and add shelters, by putting these in, and they go about every mile on the island, there would be a place where, so basically a half a mile distance between a code blue and where a pedestrian would be. It allows them to go there and get instant communications with fire or sheriff for emergency services, whether it's health issue or safety issue. The difference between that and a cell phone is they don't always know where you are as a cell phone, and people that are tourists certainly can't describe where they are. By having this, they would know. We talked to the fire department about cameras. The camera for the code blue station turned out to be relatively expensive. An option that the fire department came up with is putting, very much like we have the traffic cams at Newton Park and here at Town Hall, putting one across from the major shelters. And what they do with that is they're responding to an emergency. They can call up that camera and see exactly what's going on. They found it to be very beneficial, and it's a way to put it in the same monitoring we have today. Next thing is the interlocal with the county. Again, in May of 2019, it was agreed that we would put markings on the sidewalk. For one side would show a bicycle in the direction the bike's supposed to go, and the other side would show a pedestrian. That was in 2019. We still haven't entered the interlocal with the county to do that. So we're asking that someone starts the interlocal with that so we can get those markings on the sidewalk. The lighting RFP, I don't know if you approved that yesterday or not for the contract, but we did have a member on that review committee, and what we're asking is when the recommendations come forward, we'd like to be able to be part of reviewing the recommendations so that we can look at that in context with the safety issues on the island, the background that we've had with other studies, and the crosswalk discussions we have with the county and the lighting on that, so that we can make recommendations along with the other committees or whoever else is making recommendations to you when the consultant finishes. The last thing is bicycle safety. Talked about, and I believe we have an ordinance that says they're supposed to have an audible device, a horn, a bell or something like that, plus lights after dark. And anybody who's been on the sidewalks know full well nobody has bells on their bikes. The number of people have is very minimal. Those that do, and I use mine all the time, people hear that and they get out of the way. They may jump the wrong direction, but they do hear you and they're aware that you're coming. And the lighting, it's quite often that people are surprised the sunset comes and then suddenly it's dark and they're out there without lighting, along with lighting for the bicycle lane. So what we did is we had Chelsea look into it, and we can actually buy bells for about $100, or 100 bells for about 120 bucks. Lights, white and red, again, for around 120 bucks per 100. And so what we want you to do is consider us buying, the town buying a number of lights, and we can tell how many bikes basically there are in the rental companies and people have here, and make those available for free to the general public and to the rental companies in order to help improve the safety of the island. We could probably do it for under $1,000, and we would greatly improve the opportunity for people that are walking to hear the bell, to get out of the way so they don't get hit, and at the same time, by having the lights on there, people that do get caught out after dark or people that want to ride in the bike lane can have that red flashing light to make people, drivers, aware until we get those bike lines remarked. Those are the 6 issues that we're working on. If you have any questions about any, I'm glad to answer it, or wait till the general discussion.
I went and looked at the new transit shelter on Bay Street, and I was surprised because it didn't look like I expected it to look. The shade area is very tiny. I think maybe 2 people could stand under it. And it's also very narrow so that it's not going to shade for most of the day except when the sun is directly overhead. I don't think that looks like what your model one looked like. Have they told you that this is what the rest are going to look like, or is this just a one out because it's the tram shelter and not the regular one?
No, it's what the county paid for. And so we said is we agreed that we would put it up. We agreed with Chelsea that we would put it up. We would monitor the usage of it. We will survey the people that are there as to what works and doesn't work. And then from there, this is a prototype shelter. So I did agree with you that the shelter on there, you're not going to get a lot. For someone as ill as I am, that's not going to help a whole lot if I have to sit there for 20 minutes. But it's a prototype shelter. It's a prototype shelter for the Code Blue. And from that, we hope to do a survey of the people that are taking the tram, people that are using that as a transfer from the trolley to the other, and then come back and make recommendations on how we add coverage over the other 2 benches that are there, and also if there's a way to improve the shading. Just a prototype.
Thanks.
Go ahead. I just want to make, one kind of comment, because I know one of the reasons why I'm really kind of enthusiastic about this is there's overlap on certain topics. And as chairs, you guys can freely communicate with each other as long as you don't serve on a committee together. And I would encourage you to reach out and talk to Steve, because Murph is also working on the lighting, so you guys can get that balance between the safety and the environmental obligations we have.
Okay.
And thank you all for your service, by the way.
And I just want to comment on a couple things. I love this concept of your committee providing the council some incident data on criminal activity on the island. The council's really flying blind. We hear anecdotal information all the time, and we don't have any hard data. And to see that information, particularly vetted through your committee, either monthly or quarterly, whatever is easiest for you guys, would be extremely helpful, because we're considering a lot of public policy issues that affect public safety, and that kind of data, particularly vetted through you all, who can figure out a way to utilize that data in a way that's helpful for policymaking on the island, would be much appreciated. So I think that's great. I'm glad you're looking at the community policing proposal. I think we've all sat down, the council members have individually sat down with the sheriff's department and been briefed on their proposal. I hope you guys take a look at that, get that same briefing and analyze it and look at the fiscal impact. I found it to be very intriguing, but I'm glad you're taking a hard look at that, so I encourage that. I also am interested in this sidewalk marking issue. That conversation happened at a previous council, and as somebody who's watching these massive, beautiful new sidewalks being put in on the south end right now, particularly in areas that they never had sidewalks before, some sort of policy to encourage more people to leave their cars at home and get on their bikes and start walking, and help maybe have a small impact on our traffic dynamic is great. I don't know what the answer is on that. I'm sure it's going to be a pretty intense public discussion on that, but I welcome your vetting of that, because I think that could really be helpful, particularly with all the new infrastructure improvements on the island. So you guys have a lot on your plate, but it's extremely, what you're working on is, to me, very interesting and very helpful. So I appreciate you and your committee's efforts.
Just 2 points on what you said. The first is, as we went through this with the sheriff, the initial review of their reports, the woman who represented Lonnie Kai was actually pretty close. Didn't present it too well, but a great number of those calls that get equated, and it has been, I'll call it anecdotally equated to Lonnie Kai in the thousands, those are actually just the cars are parked, and they happen to be parked in that area, so they say we're parked in the Lonnie Kai. And so what we're trying to do is weed out these things that really aren't calls, and the numbers come down dramatically. Things that, there was a murder. Well, that's nothing community policing is going to deal with. Those are, one-offs that happen occasionally. And by doing that, this list will become very narrow. But that goes to community policing, because once we get that, instead of package that they offer that just says 2 officers, 200 grand, something like that, we're actually going to make them say, if this is the issue, like bicycles, the e-bikes, if this is the issue, how exactly will you deal with this, and what metrics are you going to show that you actually have improved the number of e-bikes or golf carts that are riding on the sidewalk? So we'll require them to give us measures that says, for this price, for this service, this is what you would expect, so we can evaluate that 6 months, a year out to find out if, in fact, it's worth that service and the cost we're paying for it. The other on the sidewalks, the markings will do some of it, education's part of it, but the other thing that comes out of this same research we're doing, if you go up by Times Square, once you get to Crescent, it gets very congested. In Times Square, you're not allowed to ride your bike, you have to walk it. So part of this will be looking at pedestrian bicycle incidents that they get, and see if we need to move that walk your bike from Times Square maybe down to Crescent, and other areas, maybe down by Lenham. There may be areas in there where we say from the Holiday Inn or Wyndham or whatever it's called now, from there maybe to Santini, it gets very congested. So we say in this area, bicycles must be walked. So those are the type of things we're looking at, in addition to just community policing, other things that are policy issues or signage issues.
That would all be extremely welcome. So thank you.
I'm pretty much up to date. I communicate with John quite often, being the liaison, so I'm fully aware of what they're working on. The thing I will add to it, though, John, is I have been in contact with Commissioner about the crosswalk lighting and questions about that. I'll make sure the next time that I speak with him that I bring up the markings on the sidewalk. I don't know if he's aware of that or not, but I'll make sure that he is.
My understanding is we need an interlocal in order for even the town to put the markings down. And if you'd like to see those, I can forward through Chelsea what those actually look like, because we agreed to what they would be.
That would be great, because I've never seen that before. That'd be helpful.
Just make a few comments, John. Thanks for your very concise report, as always. Number of crosswalks, I don't know what the number is down there. I mean, I'm not a professional in that area, but my only comment would be that any crosswalk that we build from now on should be fully automated. That's the way I feel about it. There are still crosswalks throughout the island, as you well know, that people will be standing there and people zooming by and not see them and not stopping, even with someone on the opposite side direction stopped, they'll still proceed. And frankly, I've done it myself. I mean, it's happened to me before where I didn't see someone over there. So I really feel that any crosswalk that is built should be lighted with the flashing lights. That's my opinion. Interlocal with the county regarding labeling the sidewalks. I'm interested in hearing more about that. I'll tell you my experience with that is I'm a dog walker. I've got one older one and one crazy younger one. So I do this all the time, and I'll be walking down the sidewalk, which is like walking down a strand now. It's beautiful, 8 foot, 10 foot, whatever they are. They're beautiful sidewalks. But at the last second, I'll hear someone on your right, and it's like, really, and someone's right up my, what, on a bicycle, zooming by. Some electric, some manually, some old-fashioned ones, I guess. But it's dangerous. That's my point. It's very dangerous. And so I'd be interested in seeing where, what the zones are, where these will be labeled. If people can be out on the street, if the bike lanes are provided, they should be out there in their lanes, not on sidewalks. I don't think it's a good match. I mean, it works out in California on the strands out there on the beaches and everything, but I don't see it working here yet, and maybe, of course, this labeling will take it to the next level, but I'm not sure. But I'd like to hear more about it. Definitely, the bells and lights on the bicycles. I mean, that's a gimme. That has to happen. And one last thing I've noticed here, and this is just personal observation of mine, the flashing lights for the beach school, 15-mile-per-hour lights. Those are very important to me. Having sent my child to school there, I'm very conscious of the safety around the school. And what's happening now is the trees on the library side where the sign is, and also the trees on the other side where the other sign is on the southbound lane are being covered by tree limbs and branches. I don't know whose jurisdiction that is, but that's something that really has to be maintained constantly, not quarterly, not weekly, constantly. So anyhow, that's all I have. And again, if there's anything else for John?
Let me just clarify one
Yes.
thing on the crosswalk lighting. We don't control that. We've had that discussion many times with the county. Hopefully out of the survey and out of the discovery, we will identify crosswalks that are more dominant and where that would be more prevalent, or would require the red flashing RFBs. But the county has told us is that too many of those flashing crosswalk lights cause fatigue and people start to ignore them. So that's the reason we'll see some resistance. But out of the discovery, we will get, between the survey and the other, places where people feel there are not crosswalks or where that lighting is required, and we'll use that as part of our justification in our recommendations to you when you go to the county. As far as the markings on the sidewalk, there are only 4 places where there's no bike lane in the road. It's only blended, like north of Lover's Lane going up, et cetera.
Gotcha. Well, that's great. I appreciate that. Yeah, Roger.
Just so everyone's aware, and I mentioned it, FDOT has taken time for the foot, and they're brief town council about that on March. Overall project, bridge, on the bridge, thereafter. So, comments, urge everyone to take design that will be any applications to them so that they can.
In light of that, I'd recommend you have an engineer with FDOT when they come, so that when you ask questions about why they require it versus a barrier, that you get an answer that is not, well, the engineers require it, without any discussion about, you have barriers other places that are the exact same thing, and yet here you're saying no. I mean, if you want less crosswalks, that's what I recommend, is that we can tell you where we thought the crosswalk shouldn't be and how we get around that. We have that design. We provided that before. I can have Chelsea, do that again. But without the engineers there, that's the answer you're going to get.
Thanks, John. Appreciate that. So we'll move on. John, feel free if you want to leave, just, you won't hurt our feelings if you take off. Anybody else for that matter. Okay, we'll go on next to the Marine Resources Task Force, and Chairman Steve Johnson is with us this morning.
Mayor, you've all received the two-page.
Yes.
But I'll just jump right in then. I won't read the whole thing, but first initiative is the Estero Boulevard roadway lighting. The status is ongoing. I think you're all up to speed on where that's at. The town just agreed to let the town manager negotiate with the lighting firm that won the RFQ. Next, yellow-bellied slider, turtle sales. So we left this with Ranger, Rob, and the Tiki Hut owners to work it out amongst themselves. They both had ideas of what they can do to relieve the problems of released turtles into the Gulf, into our town, and they were supposed to circle back with us in January. So they have not, so we're assuming everything's going nicely. Next is invasive vegetation management. That's a current item on with the committee. We've actually took a vote and need to notify the council that we would like the town to budget, if they can, to help remove the exotic vegetation in the east zone and specifically the CWA. I think the big point here is that there's a lot of Australian pine seedlings that are growing. Now's the time to get them. You know, some of this is private land, so with the permission of property owners, we'd like to see if we can pull those out to avoid much larger problems in the future, much costlier taking those larger plants down, but also to take out the invasives while we're at it. But right now, I think there's just Chad Schutz as a one-man team there, and if we can get him some resources to help with that, I think the town would benefit from that. The second is that we've got a program now with the Lee County Extension Service, the Master Gardeners organization. We have a member on committee that is working with them and mobilizing these master gardeners. They have community service credits they need to earn, so it's quite easy for them to do it, especially since things have been locked down. They haven't been out to be able to get those community service points. So they are going to go through the entire island, neighborhood by neighborhood, and identify to us and keep an inventory of exotic invasive plants. And the next step then would be to take a look at that once we get the information and decide what to do with it, to see if there's and what we can do to mitigate it. Next is the dune management policy. As you know, there's a renourishment that'll be going on the north end again. I think the engineering is happening right now. We've got the initial funds for the engineering. We would like to actually take this dune managed beach zone plan that usually goes hand in hand with the renourishment. Typically, homeowners aren't allowed to get the renourishment unless they agree to grow dunes. That's how it was done back in, I don't have the exact date, but the last northern renourishment. I recall over where the Sunset Grill was, there was a big hole there because they wouldn't find that MBZ. But the purpose of the MBZ is to grow a frontal dune along the beach. And right now, there's a lot of homeowners that are restricted, afraid to let a dune grow, because once that dune grows, it's completely out of their control. They can't touch it, they can't lower it, they can't do anything with it. And what this managed beach zone plan does actually is, with an agreement to front their property by at least 75%, it allows them to manage the dune. So basically keep it in its footprint. So if it does grow, they actually have the ability to smaller footprint, and the ability to also, if it was to get too large, to actually top it if they had to a certain size. But there's a list of criteria that goes along with it. And right now, Chad is actually looking at an ordinance that can help grow dunes on the beach. But he also needs to harmonize that with the comprehensive plan. You'll see in the notes that I mentioned that just beach nourishment alone protects against 5-year storms. With the combination of a frontal dune, it actually will protect the beach for to 10-year storms. So I think that's worthwhile to protect our beach. Next is the Fertilizer Ordinance outreach, essentially done. I'd like to thank the town for getting the enforcement team together, who's been doing a lot of the communication, the handouts, the landscapers, the condos, the property managers, to just alert them to the new regulations. And also the PR campaigns. It's been in multiple town advisories, so I think that was very effective, so thank you to the town. Next on the list is the Reef Safe Sunscreen product education. This has not begun, essentially due to the preemption on the sale ban of sunscreen, which was Key West had actually had started it. They're looking at other ways to discuss with the public on how to use the proper sunscreens. Carlos Bridge rubble, I think that's one of our mayor's interests as well. This project is ongoing. There's not a lot that Murph is really involved with the exception of just staying informed. As you all know, there's the meeting, a big Carlos Bridge project meeting on January 28th in Bay Oaks. I invite you all to attend and give input to the county on that. What we would like them to do is take the rubble from the old Big Carlos Bridge when that occurs and actually make an artificial reef offshore. County Councilman Veach is in the loop on this. He got in an email chain that keeps us really informed. There is a website now that'll give information as well. They actually like to steer it to actually have a right off of Fort Myers Beach. Right now they have permitted reefs, like Edison Reef is permitted already, so they could simply pull up and drop it there. But we'd like to maybe be involved to see if we can use our own bridge rubble for our purposes locally. Second page here, the Big Carlos Bridge, the fishing pier. Again, one item here also is on that fishing pier. Again, you can give that input at the meeting. But again, if town council or any residents have the influence, can influence the decision, we'd like you all to stay involved. But also, we would like to ensure that maybe there's a public beach access down there as well. I think for the funding of renourishment programs, that additional beach access puts us in a better position when pursuing those funds. Next, dark skies, a model ordinance review that has not begun, so we will be beginning discussions at our next MRF meeting on that to take a look at whether or not the town does have one and whether or not it needs modernization. Got a few here a few items here also that maybe cross over with the Anchorage Committee as well. We brought this up in the June update when I was on council, but the derelict vessels in Estero Bay, I believe Vice Mayor Hassefras had mentioned that was something that the Anchorage Committee was working on. We actually did nominate Vice Chair Fossum from our group to talk with the advisory committee, but that hasn't occurred yet. So he needs to get together with you before we actually do anything on that particular initiative. Also, boat holding tank regulations. Last time we had talked about pump outs, but in this case, it really falls under the same situation as the derelict vessels. I don't know if the Anchorage got any kind of regulations or certifications or enforcements. And so moving on, public marina bacteria testing. This is something we've kicked around. We haven't begun discussions at the MRF meetings yet. In this case, there's been some complaints, I think, on the north side of the island that at times there was sewage smell. The homeowners felt they smelled it. Staff timed these complaints with the moon cycle and felt that it was really low tides when the homeowner was smelling this, so they're not absolutely sure. I think there was some testing to determine whether there was bacteria in the water, and there wasn't. The thought was, do we need to monitor public marinas for bacterial testing? Should we consider maintaining pump out logs? Blue dye, I believe, is also a effective measure that's put into the holding tank so that if it is dumped, immediately get realize that there's been an illegal dump. So that's something we're considering as well. Next is the Sea Turtle Ordinance. That has not begun as well, with the exception of just a short conversation. There was a new model ordinance adopted in 2019, maybe it was early 2020. And so really, the thought was to take a one-year review and just determine whether or not there's any management or enforcement that model is not helping force. So last but not least, filling holes on the beach. You know, we've talked about this really quite a bit. And the last possibility we considered was to somehow require the homes or the condos and resorts. If nobody else will do it, then technically that's their property. And specifically condos, after their guests leave for the day, do they have a manager that can go out and fill holes? I mean, I don't know how that could be enforced, whether or not homeowners would be required to do it as well. So the final conclusion was that the most effective way is to, you know, to request that council direct the town manager to use resources to fill the holes to ensure the safety. And that's all we have for you today. And
What have you been doing? I mean,
a lot of them haven't begun, so it looks good, Ray. But
thanks, Steve. That's a great report. Questions for Steve?
Quick, first of all, thanks for all the information you've been providing on the lighting. It's really great background information. You mentioned something about the need for a beach access point, which I missed that. Steve, could you just extrapolate a little bit more on that, please?
I don't think there's an official beach access at the foot of the bridge. There's an unofficial one that everybody uses to fish and to go down to the beach, but I don't think that's a town-owned access. Maybe
You mean, you're talking about the south end?
the south end. Did I say Matanzas, Big Carlos? I'm sorry if I
Yeah.
misspoke.
It's okay.
But as part of that design of a new bridge, it would make sense to have an access there. And I think, again, the idea is, since we're in the middle of this renourishing engineering project, it's a lot of the funds for renourishment come based on you know, the amount of public access. It's just like TDC funds, you know, are typically used toward public accesses for the beach. So the idea would be to discuss with the county to ensure that maybe there's a beach access there as well that can be maintained for the public.
That's an intriguing idea. Thank you. I'd not heard that before.
What do you envision there? Like a walk-in access, just to walk in, no parking or anything like that? Or do you,
Probably, I don't know the space at all, but just an access, I think.
how much?
Yeah, I think there's a public benefit, of course, to it, but statistically, it would help the town in the calculations for nourishment funds and other funds that are available for.
It would probably help towards a fishing pier if you go to TDC fund.
Exactly, right. Maybe there'd be an access through there as well, yeah.
And I assume, you know, because I think they build the new bridge alongside the old bridge. So that's the area you would have, right? They eventually tear down the old bridge. That space should be available and part of a right-of-way.
I would think there's space down there.
Any other questions for Steve? Just have a comment.
Kudos.
A comment, Steve. Talked about the Big Carlos Pass Bridge. Later in the meeting, I've handed out some information to the council. There's a council member in Bonita Springs who has taken a very big interest in the design of the bridge at Big Carlos Pass. It's Councilwoman Amy Quaremba. She's done a lot of homework on this, and their council, their city council, the Bonita Springs, that's her district, by the way. All of Hickory Island, Lover's Key, that's Amy's district. They go by district. So she has a very big interest in it. Their city council has came out against that alternative, the bridge. Yes, they preferred either maintaining the existing bridge or the 20-foot school bridge. So, and also a prior town council here on the beach, the same opinion. And Mayor Gore was mayor. Joanne Sham, Bruce Pitcher, Anita Saracita, and Dennis Boback were members. They also unanimously opposed the 60-foot bridge. Before I was on council again, I spoke before the commissioners opposing the 60-foot bridge. So this councilwoman, council lady, in advance of the get-together at Bay Oaks, wants to see if this council is still interested in joining their council in opposing that 60-foot bridge. Now, whether there's an appetite on this council for that, I don't know, but we're going to find out. We're going to find out, and if so, show our support with the city of Bonita Springs. Where does that get us at this point? I don't know. But, it's worth exploring that if there are still doubts about it. So we'll be having that discussion later on here if you're interested, or you can tune in later and watch it at your convenience. Mr. Town Manager.
Sir, I just wanted to mention two issues real quickly as part of Steve's report. One is that our staff already, when we see there are holes on the beach, we property owner to address that problem. And maybe not as timely as we would all like to see, but successful in resolving those issues. The second thing that he mentioned, sure shortly you're going to hear an impassioned plea from the Anchorage Advisory Committee upland facility. That facility, as well as the other efforts were made, managed mooring field will better help us in dealing with the potential for just be they accidental or intentional. So, there's a synergy.
Very good. Very good. Anything left, Steve? Or you're
Nope,
okay?
done.
Thank you very much for your report. We'll move on. Next, we'll hear from Barb Hill, who this morning is wearing her cell cab hat, which is the Cultural and Environmental Learning Center Advisory Board, and otherwise known as the Mound House. So, Barb, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, and our Cultural and Environmental Learning Center Advisory Board, commonly known as CELCAB, actually oversees the town's Mound House Museum and the Newton Park Seven Seas properties.
Left out Newton, sorry.
We are guided by the strategic plans which were developed and approved by council several years ago. And we're very happy to report that because of the leadership of our director, Allison Giesen, she and her staff have done an outstanding job in managing the programs and operations during what has been a challenging year because of the pandemic. The Mound House and Museum Store continue to be open to the public 3 days a week, with the grounds open sunrise to sunset, which has been allowed to continue, which we're grateful for. We have new and continuing programs, including the kayak tours, which have been very popular, and the lecture series, which is now being conducted via Zoom. One of the town's capital projects this year is to fund the improvements for the Stories Beneath Our Feet exhibit, the underground exhibit, which will include the new audio-visual equipment, a larger screen, and improved sound. So that is something that we really needed almost immediately after the Mound House was open 5 years ago, but we're pleased to have that now in place, and I understand the contractor is in the process of being hired, so we're very thankful for that. We have published a hardcover coffee table book. I'm sure all of you have seen it. Hopefully all of you have a copy, and if not, I hope you go down to the museum store and buy one. The proceeds from that beautiful publication goes to benefit the Mound House. So it's been a very popular book. It was extraordinarily well documented, and the author donated his services, and he did an outstanding job. The Tuesdays and Thursday mornings at the Newton Park, we hold the beach walks, which have again been very popular. That is again, continuing and gives the community, not only the residents, but also the visitors, an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what those things are that you see along the beach that we may or may not be familiar with. And I can tell you, I've lived on the beach here for quite some time, but I always find something that I have never seen before. So I think those beach walks have been hugely informative and well-run. So kudos to the volunteers that do that.
Excuse me. You say quite some time you lived on the beach. Why don't you tell everybody how long you lived on the beach, Barb?
Well, I moved to the beach, not that I've lived here all those years, but I moved to the beach in 1954 in January. That is quite a bit.
That is. Okay, thank you.
So I
I'm sorry
lived
to
on the
interrupt.
beach, yes, as a teenager growing up here on the beach, and then was in other parts of Florida and moved back 16 years. Which is, it was not my plan, but there it is, and it's great. I'm happy to be back.
You were here, as they say, BC.
Exactly.
Yes. Okay.
Yes, I was here before that South Bridge was even talked about.
Yeah.
Half of the island was just a shell road, not a paved road.
Yes.
I've seen a lot of changes, and all of those changes certainly come with controversy, but interestingly enough, virtually everything that was hugely controversial at the time turned out to be much beloved later on. Skyway Bridge being a perfect example, the Matanzas Bridge. So the historic Mrs. Cottage is in the process of being repaired and repainted. We chose, which I hope you all agree, was an interesting color. Are you pleased with it?
I love the color, beautiful.
We wanted to get away from sort of the dull gray that it was, but still keep in mind, you know, the authenticity and the integrity of the historic cottage. But we felt that kind of gave it a nice lift that property needed. We also recommended that the town be a little bit more, let's see, what's the word, ambitious in terms of the landscaping and trimming the landscaping. I think in terms of how they chose the native landscaping that they did when that property was being redone was wise, because it's all beautifully planted. However, everything is grown way, way too tall, and the historic cottage can barely be seen from the road and certainly barely seen from the beach. And so I recommend that we actually have the town cut a lot of those trees down so that there is greater visibility. There is really not programming going on right now because of the pandemic, but certainly once programming begins, it would be really nice to have that done. Next week, we're just going to be reviewing the strategic plans, which we do every 6 months, for both Newton Park and for the Mound House, to determine, you know, how the staff is managing the timelines and the various projects. So we sort of oversee that, but I have to tell you, the town has done a terrific job in terms of the operations, the budgeting, the staff, the programs have been amazing. So I want to thank not only the staff, but also the council for their ongoing support. It's really been a huge success story. I think that's all I have to report.
Thanks, Barb. Anybody have any questions or comments for Barb?
Just one comment, Barb, is it, I see a lot of potential synergy between you and Murph on this environmental education. Just, you know, make sure that maybe all the Murph members are on your mailing list when you do have your programs, and that maybe there can be some interaction, so that if Murph has suggestions about some topics that can be covered in your education. Been to a few of those lectures,
I
and they're
can't
really
really
great.
hear you. Can you speak a little closer to the,
Sure.
thank you.
I was just saying, I can see some synergy between you and Murph when it comes to the environmental education. You know, the simple thing is make sure that all the Murph members are on your mailing list. And that if there's any potential, if Murph members have any suggestions for topics that they would be interested in having covered, I think there's a lot of overlap there.
Of course, I think, as is the case with all the advisory boards, anyone can, from the public or from other advisory boards, can certainly come in and give public comment during any of our meetings. And then, of course, now that you have this new wonderful information officer, you know, there are newsletters now that are constantly going out to the public that you can sign up for that gives complete information about just exactly what current programs are, what the new programs are, any, you know, difference in terms of what the hours would be. So there is that other way of getting the information out. Yes, anyone is more than welcome to come and speak to our advisory board, and we would certainly want to work together with any of the advisory boards to make our decisions better.
Barbara, recently we had some residents express some issues with some security issues they thought maybe there was going on at Newton Park. I don't know if that has been in any of the discussions in LCAB recently about, or if maybe you guys could look at it, or maybe work with John and Public Safety Committee about something that at least look into it to see what those concerns are.
Well, and it has been an ongoing, and it's not just, you know, from people who are just being careless. There's actual vandalizing issues going on. I think the homeless have been misusing the restroom facilities. It's been, I think, redone several times now during the entire time the restrooms were installed, and so that has been an ongoing problem. I would love to see better security at Newton Park because that is a place where people are congregating and unfortunately misusing.
I know we have a camera there. Maybe this is a question for Roger. Something that we can look into to potentially adding maybe more cameras, since there is already one there, to help town staff keep a closer eye on it?
Well, Council, your question was asked electronically by Councilor Veach about a week or so ago. And I contacted Allison Geeson regarding those issues. And she's looking into them. She reported at the time that she didn't find anything out of normal, that, you know, what normal means. But I will ask her to some more detailed information, next report to that will become that all five of you have, and if you feel it's necessary, we can have a detailed discussion about it, observations, and a chance to give her some input and what the next steps might be to actually exist out.
Else for Barb? Okay, well, thanks, Barb, and thank you for your service on CELCAB, to your fellow members, and all of the volunteers that are down there at the Mount House and Newton Park.
Pass that along, thank you.
We appreciate all your efforts, and we know you're in good hands with Allison, and we're all very fortunate to have her leading you all on.
Indeed.
So we appreciate that, too. Thank you. We'll move on. Staying with ladies first, we're going to go to Betty Simpson, the BORCAB, which is our Bay Oaks Recreational Center Advisory Board. Betty Simpson is our chair. Betty, you have the floor.
Thank you. I'm delighted to be here this morning, of course, representing Bay Oaks Recreational Campus Advisory Board, commonly known as BORCAB. As you well know, we have been busy the last couple of years working on the redevelopment plan for the Bay Oaks campus. Our goal has been to meet the needs of a true community center, showcasing a beautiful property. After a great deal of input from both our group and from each and every one of you, especially with our meeting just 2 days ago with you as on the council, I'm delighted to say that it looks as if we will be moving forward with the plan phases. Decisions like this are not always easy to make, but I personally thank each of you for listening to us and getting the Bay Oaks development plan moving in a positive direction. Thank you. In closing, I would just like to say that it's been my privilege to serve and participate in these council committee meetings. It's kind of become a tradition. And I always look forward to hearing what all the other committees are doing. It gives us a true opportunity to learn from one another. I hope that you all will be watching, and there may even be an opportunity along the line to help BORCAB to bring about a true community center for our island that all of us will be able to enjoy. Thank you in advance for any of your participation. Thank you.
Thanks, Betty. Short and sweet. That's why I love you. Okay. Any questions for Betty?
I'll just put a comment. I really appreciate your words, Betty, and I know that sometimes the discussion has been spirited, should we say, because everyone is very passionate about this island and what it has to offer, but I'm personally excited about the plan going forward. I think it has a lot of potential, and I think it's going to be well received, and I think it's going to be a great asset for the island, and I do appreciate BORCAB's constant and long-term guidance in the
I'm also very excited about what's going to happen down there. And I don't want to keep repeating it, but having raised a child here on the beach and sent her through beach school and participated in all of the Bay Oaks programs throughout the years and, right through her high school and even college years, it holds a very special place in our hearts. And anything we can do down there to improve it and carry on its great activities and purpose, actually, I'm all in favor of. Forward to getting that shovel in the ground with you all. So,
Thank you.
okay. We'll go to Catherine Light next with the Anchorage Advisory Committee.
Thank you,
Morning,
Mr.
Catherine.
Mayor. I think you all should have, hopefully, some bullet points of what we've been working on. I have 4 things: upland service provider, expansion of the mooring field, strategic plan, and sort of a catch-all at the end, mooring field staff report that we received, which has a lot of issues, which I'll touch on later. But I've been before you quite a few times discussing the upland service provider. Just to bring the people that are here that aren't on the council up to date, we've been working for 2 years to identify areas or to perhaps take our service provider in-house. Right now, we have a relationship with Matanzas Inn. They're our service provider. And through that time, we've decided that in a committee, it took a long time to get there, that we really feel that we need to take it in-house. Matanzas is making their own improvements, and we feel that this kind of goes into the expansion of the mooring field. If we're going to do that, we need more of a facility than we have right now. And Matanzas is doing their own remodeling, and we have 2 shower units there. Really isn't enough for what we have right now. So staff has done a lot of work trying to identify properties. We kind of looked at Bayside Park. That didn't work out. We've looked at other places. And we have to have a waterfront facility, obviously. We have to have water access, and there are limited properties on the island. And if there are properties, a lot of those are really expensive, and we can't afford them. And so we have come down to proposing to purchase 2 units at Harbor House. And I know that there have been informal talks dealing with condo documents, and I know there's going to be a discussion in the following meeting here. What we're hoping is, I know there are issues with those documents, as there are with condos. And what we're hoping is that the town council will make a formal proposal to purchase these units with the hope that negotiations can happen to be able to come to an agreement with the rules in the condo. Until a formal proposal is made, you really can't negotiate. So we would like to see that happen. We feel that that's really our only option on the island. If we don't go that way, we will stay at Matanzas, and we don't feel we have the room for expansion of our facilities there, which goes into the second item that we've been working on, the expansion of the mooring field. We have a 70-ball mooring field. We're looking to expand west of the bridge near the Coast Guard station to 19 more balls. So we're going through right now trying to get the land lease for that area. We currently have 2 land leases, one for the mooring field we have and one for the dinghy dock under the bridge. We're working to combine all 3 of them into one. And through doing that, we just did a slight review of the harbor management plan that's going to be coming before you. We have the permit from the Army Corps of Engineers, but we need to get one from the DEP, and in doing that, we had to tweak our harbor management plan. Also, in doing that, Chelsea is looking for grants to help pay for that. And so the harbor management plan had to be looked at again for that. So we've been working at expanding the mooring field. And again, as I reiterate, if we're even going to think about adding more balls, we have to have more of an upland facility. So that goes back to number 1. Our third point was our strategic plan. We had 2 sessions last January and February and completed a strategic plan, which really has to do with the future of our mooring field in services, reacting with the public, all different kinds of issues with that. And we feel it's a very good plan. Unfortunately, a lot of you are on hold because of COVID-19. And many of our goals and target dates we're having to put off. So we're going to have to revisit that when we have some relief from COVID, because a lot of the things, as I say, have to do with facilities, dealing with the public, and we just can't do some of the things that we would hope we could do. The fourth item, as I said, is kind of catch-all. We receive every meeting a mooring field and staff report from Austin and Chelsea about issues in the mooring field. And it's a wide range of topics, and as was pointed out, some of the topics that Steve brought up today, we deal with pump-out boats. We pump out in the mooring field, but we also pump out the boats that are outside of the mooring field. We deal with the water police, to put it that way, with derelict boats, which is a complex issue of removal, of identifying who owns them and removal. Delinquent accounts within our field, field maintenance, mooring ball maintenance, and dock maintenance at our dinghy dock, and mooring system issues. So there are a couple of water quality issues we deal with the pump outs, which is also a complex issue with the Coast Guard, and trying to, it's difficult to pursue legal issues sometimes with that, because you almost have to catch them in the act, and that's very difficult to do. So, but there's some things that we could probably work with MRF with water quality and derelict boats, at least have some discussions. So that mooring field and staff report that's just a few of the issues we deal with, and that's kind of a wide-ranging topics. So,
Good.
any questions?
Questions for Catherine? Go ahead, Jim.
Catherine, I asked this question truly as an informational question without any prejudice, because I don't know the answer. Just briefly, what's the public policy argument for increasing the size of the mooring field? In other words, what's the public interest in doing that? I just don't know. I'm honestly asking the question.
Well, there have been issues with the area that we're looking to expand is west of the Coast Guard station. Where right now there are boats anchored, and there are some derelict boats there too. And I know that there are people that have waterfront property there that are concerned about issues there. If we put mooring balls in there, we would have more control over the area.
In other words, these are rogue boats right now that might be dumping into the bay. There may not be
Some
complying
of
with the
them
rules.
might be, but our pump-out boat goes out there.
Okay.
They can make appointments. We've had grants in the past, actually, in the mooring field. It's part of their fee. It's free. Our boat comes out to them. And we've had grants that have made it free, pretty much, that they can get tickets for that. I don't know if that grant is still in effect.
It is.
It is, yes.
Counselor, if I may, Kathy, if I may. So, my comments a few minutes ago after Steve's report, I was mentioning a synergy. So, right now, the area that we don't manage, potentially manage if we add these additional 19 mooring balls, is the Wild West. We don't necessarily have jurisdiction over what happens out there. We can offer programs to them, and they may or may not participate. By putting it under the town's management control, we'll have a little greater authority and ability to control behaviors out there. The other thing is, if we can figure out a way to have an enhanced upland facility, people's access to the amenities that we offer at that facility, showers, laundry, etc., will be contingent on them being a good citizen, good steward, good seaman, seawoman, in terms of their behaviors within our managed mooring field. So all of that collectively raises the level of quality of the mooring field, both from an amenity standpoint, attractiveness to people to come visit or stay longer, and to better insulate us from potential environmental issues.
I appreciate that very much. I think it's helpful to have this conversation, particularly as we talk about expending funds to improve the facilities for the island. I think it's important just to help the public who doesn't, the mooring field's a unique world, and I think it's helpful for the public to understand the public policy benefits of doing what we do in the mooring field. So I would just keep that in mind as we go forward, to continue to use these opportunities to educate the public as to why we have a mooring field, what the benefits are, the public interest benefits for the island, just to continue to talk about that, because I think a lot of folks aren't familiar with that world.
Well, and to go back to the Harbor House units too, we've looked at a lot of places around the island, which there aren't very many, but if we do expand into that area, that's more of a central location. I mean, some people have talked about Bay Oaks, which is really not a good spot for this, but that's way away from everything. Whereas Harbor House is right under the bridge. If we expand to the west and we have our field on the east, it's centrally located. It's also right in the heart of Times Square too, where we have restaurants, we have transportation, we have all the amenities that our people would want. And so it enhances our whole, as Roger was saying, making people come here, and also we have, we can have a nice managed field and something that people want to come for.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Catherine. As you say, we'll be addressing that later on in our meeting.
I know
And
you will.
sure we'll flesh out a lot of those items, issues. So, okay, next will be our Audit Committee. And our esteemed chairman on that one is Daniel Hughes. Dan is home today, a little under the weather, and we wish you well, Dan, if you're watching and listening. And get back to work, will you? You've done enough of this gold bricking at home. It's time to get back to work. So, in his stead is our esteemed vice chair, Mr. Ed Lombard. And Ed, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. As the mayor said, I am pinch hitting for Dan. Those are big shoes to fill. I won't try to do that, but I'll do my best. I want to report that the Audit Committee is up to an all-time high membership of 7 now. We started and worked for many years with 5. We have 2 new members with excellent backgrounds, Kirkbride and Brian Thomas, They've joined what was then the current committee of Dick Cody, John Goggin, Jim Steele, myself, and Dan. Of course, we have our esteemed mayor as our council liaison, and we have a former liaison here with Rexanne. So our council, I think, has a pretty good understanding of what we do and how we do it. Recent activities. Just a while ago, approved a new wire transfer policy for electronic funds transfers, which was done because of some work that came out of the 2019 audit, and it replaced the former electronic funds policy. I think the new policy, which, by the way, was approved by this council on December 7th, is a really, really good one. It's a more centralized policy and has some good controls in it. So we were pleased to recommend it and pleased that the council approved it. Another thing that we've done recently is recommended the council rescind the investment policy, which we adopted several years ago under the leadership of Rodwell. By the way, this was the third try. It took us 3 meetings to recommend this repeal. I think it'd be fair to say it wasn't a popular subject for a couple meetings. I think the council was satisfied, or the committee was satisfied with the existing investment policy, but our finance director and the former finance director persuaded us. It took a little time to do that. Persuaded us that it was good. It was a good idea to suggest its repeal and to rely on the state statute, which is a good statute to use as a backfall for investment policy. Basically, the problem with the investment policy was in 2 audits they found that the auditors felt that we hadn't met the continuing education requirement in the investment policy. I have disagreed with that because they did have some continuing education, and as far as I know, the state concurred that they had participated in state-sponsored continuing education. For some reason, the auditors didn't agree with that. I think there probably would have been some basis for administrative disagreement there, but I think staff felt, and I guess, and the committee finally agreed that it'd just be better to remove the requirement entirely, and the only way to do that was to repeal the policy. Another thing I think that presented somewhat of a problem with the old investment policy is that it proposed a mix of investment types in intergovernmental funds and CDs and a few other types of investments. The typical kind of investment that Fort Myers Beach does with its excess funds are in intergovernmental pools and in CDs. They tend to be very safe. May not be whiz-bang in terms of return on investment, although we're getting anywhere from 3 to 5% on our investments right now, which isn't bad. We don't have a lot invested. It's, I think, a little over 2 million, maybe somewhere between 2 and 3 million. Time to time over the past several years, we've had anywhere from 2 to 6 million available for investment. But in any case, as I say, that mix may have presented a little bit of a problem because, as I say, they like to have all of it invested in either the CDs or intergovernmental pools. Now, as I say, we recommended a repeal. We did that in November. The council did adopt the repeal, did repeal the investment policy on December 7th. And now we fall back on the statute, on the Florida statutes for our investment policy. And the Florida statute is a good one. It's not that we needed an investment policy of our own, because it's a very good one, and it will serve us, I think, and we'll take it, and we'll be following it actually as time goes on. Another thing that that we've done just most recently was we adopted a new financial controls and reporting policy. This was done more or less as a replacement to the investment policy, although it doesn't get to investments. It's more of a financial reporting type process, but it includes something which we, when we repealed the investment policy, I felt, and I think other committee members felt, was missing, and that was a requirement for a rigorous cash flow analysis, scheduled cash flow analysis. It's the only way you can tell whether or not you have funds available for investment. Do you have the funds to do it? Do you have it in sufficient time frame in the intermediate term and long term to think about making investments without restricting your own cash flow requirements? By requiring now with this new policy a cash flow on a periodic basis, we'll find out. The finance director and town manager will be able to analyze those books and recommend investments to the council, and that will be a routine process. That's pretty much. By the way, as I understand it, this new policy, reporting policy and excess cash analysis, is pending now before the council. And in addition to that, there's a 2020 audit going on. I think our auditor is Malden and Jenkins. By the way, I should say that we're very grateful now that we have a new finance director, Walter Pierce, full-time. We need a full-time finance director. Walter has just a vast amount of experience in the field throughout the state, knows municipal finance. Our former finance director, by the way, did a terrific job in implementing that new accounting system. He set a very aggressive schedule for the implementation of that new accounting system. Got it done in time, and I understand it's working well, and so we're grateful to Robert Lang for getting that done. And as I say, we welcome Walter on board as our new full-time finance director. As I say, the 2020 fiscal year audit's ongoing. We expect that final report sometime in late March. At that point, I think it'll be ready for a management response. And at some point in the near future, I guess we'll be beginning to talk about the 2021 audit, although under the new statute, there's been some changes in the audit statutes. And I think it's if they want to renew the contract, it's a fairly simple procedure now to do so, without going through the formal process of advertising for another auditor. But we'll see what happens when that time comes. Pretty much it, Mr. Mayor.
Good, Ed. That's a great report. Any questions for Mr. Lombard?
I have a question, Ed, and I unlike what a good lawyer would advise, I like to ask questions I don't know the answers to in advance. Do you think that the audit committee could play a larger role in the budget process for the town? I don't mean necessarily setting priorities, but taking a look at what our debt is, what our reserves are, just taking a look at the process, the numbers, crunching those sort of maybe before the council gets them. Do you think that's a proper role for the audit committee? Do you think they could add any value in that process? Just thinking out loud.
That's an interesting question. Of course, I have a sort of a budgeting background. I spent a lot of years doing budget analysis and in a legislative process. I think our committee is really well-rounded with financial expertise. We have broad experience with municipal, legislative financial analysis and so forth. We have CPAs on the committee. To some extent, budgeting and auditing are a little contra each other. Auditors evaluate the budget produces. That's why you have auditors. You have auditors who come in there and decide whether or not the budget's being done properly, whether or not the rules are being followed and so forth. So you want to be a little careful about getting too involved in the formulation of the budget, or else you're coming back and evaluating what you, what I'm saying, what you yourself put together. But I listened to your comment about not setting the priorities and so forth, and I guess you're talking about them in a more technical way. My guess is that the committee would be interested in doing that as long as we're conscious of the fact that you can get a little in between in terms of the objectives of what auditors should be doing or audit oversight people should be doing and what budgeteers are doing. We're asking for more money, and these guys are over here, these people are over here trying to evaluate whether or not that is a good idea and whether or not it's been done effectively. With those caveats, that's my answer, Mr. Arnold.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Sir.
Sidewalk? I wanted to say that we have not cornered the market on every capability in the world within the staff. We welcome not only input of the Audit Committee, but all the committees in terms of the budgets. And they make budget requests to the council that becomes part of our budget. Make sure that our budget documents are available online for the committees and the public to see. By all means, we have 4 or 5 meetings with all of you as the budget process evolves, and to the extent that you have a issue or a concern or something you want looked into in more depth, to ask anyone or all of the committees to look into that issue on your behalf and give you some feedback. I will tell you that it's always challenging within our existing workload to just get the budget done, and I'd be hesitant to add a lot more steps to that process.
I'm just thinking out loud. I don't have a particular preference one way or the other, just was brainstorming.
Any other questions for Ed? Ed, thanks so much for coming in and giving us the report. I appreciate it. Keep up the good work. Okay, I'll just make note that the local planning agency, Megan Heil, chairperson, was unable to attend today, and they were unable to send anybody else down. So we won't be hearing a report from them. And the Community Resource Advisory Board, apparently they have some vacancies, so we will not be hearing a report for them, which means we're done for the day. So, and on behalf of the, yes, Mr. Manager?
Council and committee chairs, I made to myself actually 2 notes. One is I want to thank you for all your kind words about the staff and the staff liaisons who work with you. A lot of work to prepare the agendas, research the issues, and work collaboratively with you to develop answers. I appreciate your appreciation of your liaisons. The thing I didn't hear today, Mr. Mayor, that I want to at least raise as a question to everyone in the room is people who are very passionate about Newton and Mound House and about the mooring field and about our environmental issues and the town's financial management and our public safety, et cetera. I really didn't hear anyone who sort of wants to opt or take under their wing a Bayside Park. We're talking about making a significant investment into that, and I think it should have some community stewardship.
And just to comment on that, Roger, I mean, that was something that Crab was working on until the lack of participation kind of silenced the committee.
I guess we can solicit input from the town and probably come up with something, don't you think? But, anyhow, more participation, the better, of course, from the townspeople. And anything else? Well, again, thank you all for coming in this morning and for updating us on your doings. All very busy, and again, we appreciate the work you do for the town. Thank you very much. We're concluded at 10:24.